Okay. Good morning. I thought for the Rotary Minute today, I would take a look at what I could find out about Rotary's efforts to support people in Ukraine. And I found in the August issue of the Rotary magazine a short piece written by a member, a Ukrainian Rotary member. And she wrote, "Rotary's commitment to peace has been on full display in Ukraine. Thanks to the generosity of donors around the world, the Rotary Foundation has raised more than $15 million in contributions that are helping provide people with essentials such as water, food, shelter, medicine, and clothing. While many organizations raise money, Rotary is unique because our members are local. Rotarians and Rotaractors work at the front line, assessing the growing needs and helping deliver international humanitarian assistance to those who need it most. For example, the Rotary Club of Lviv is responsible for unloading and organizing relief aid from European countries, then facilitating its delivery to humanitarian hubs across the country. Some members of the Rotary Club of Kharkiv International have traveled to border countries to help refugees adapt to their new situations. As people have witnessed Rotary's extraordinary work, they have joined our organization to help. Between February and June, Rotary in Ukraine added about 100 members. I think, isn't that amazing? A delegation of Rotary members from Ukraine made the long journey to Houston to be with their Rotary family at the Rotary International Convention in June, even though there were no commercial flights out of Ukraine due to the war. Their presence drew a rousing welcome at the opening ceremony. Yeah. So, yeah. Since then, more recently, Rotary International has reported that they have awarded 272 disaster response grants totaling $8.9 million since the Russian invasion. And these grants for club projects in 29 countries support people in and around Ukraine who have been affected by the war. Rotary and Rotaract clubs worldwide have also donated millions more directly to Ukrainian clubs that are providing water, food, shelter, medicine, and clothing. And Rotary International in July announced a new partnership with a US-based nonprofit called Ukraine Friends. And for their first joint project, which is procuring and delivering nearly 50 ambulances to hospitals and other organizations. And Rotary and Ukraine Friends have donated $300,000 each toward the ambulances. And Rotary districts in Ukraine and Slovakia will work with Ukraine Friends to coordinate the delivery. So, and that's as of probably about August, and I'm sure there's much more that could be said about what Rotary International and individual clubs have done.
So I've asked Elizabeth to give us an inspiration. And so Elizabeth, I just want to say that that was pretty inspirational. Makes me proud to be part of this organization. Okay, Elizabeth, yours. Thank you.
Pretty short inspiration this morning, kind of in honor of my speaker who's not here yet and is making me nervous. So hopefully he gets here. But he's an educator. And so this is an education inspiration. So Margaret Mead said, children must be taught how to think, not what to think. Aristotle said, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. And Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world.
So I have a few business things. I'll try to talk slowly, Elizabeth. Please, everybody, take your plates up when you're finished. So a couple of things. I've put the book out for volunteer hours. So anybody who's done volunteer work in the last week, if you can think up how many hours you've done, please write it down. There's also a card up there to sign for Gary. Gary had his first cataract yesterday. And I can tell you, he was a bundle of nerves the day before. And he was going to come on Zoom. So I'm hoping he's okay, but everybody sign and tell him to be brave because he's got another one in 2 weeks. I'm really happy to say that as of today, we have 28 people signed up for our blood drive. There's still about a dozen more spots. So again, if you have friends that might be interested in giving, please encourage them to sign up. redcross.org has all the lists of donation events. So tell them specifically to look for September 28th, which is a week from yesterday, to sign up, and it'll make us look really good. And we will probably be able to become a regular donation event, because I know that Brad has already set up another date with the same place in December. So depending on how we feel about it, we can move forward and sponsor that one when the time comes. It would be nice if we became a regular sponsor of blood drives. We're having a business meeting next week, so there won't be any speaker. We'll have possibly some committee reports. We're going to talk about some important things that we need to decide going forward. And obviously updates on things that are going on. Chris, do you have a general idea of the ramp timing? Yep. When she comes back, right? Yeah.
So I'll let you know more. I'm actually going out there today.
Yeah.
Survey the situation, so I can see how much
Elevation. Yeah.
There's gonna have to be a return. That much I know.
Okay. All right. Okay. So for those of you online who might not have heard, Chris is in touch with the family. They have to build a deck before we can build the ramp. But he will give us an update as much as he knows it, and we'll get a team out there to build that ramp as soon as we can. She's coming back October 10th from her rehab hospital in Boston. So we want everything to be ready for her when she gets back. And I think that's it. Elizabeth?
All right, so our speaker today is Matt Schlein, and he is a former actor, writer, and director who currently serves as founder and director of the Willowell Foundation. For the last 23 years, Willowell has been committed to the consilience of arts, education, and the environment, with an emphasis on connecting youth to the ecology of the Champlain Valley. The success of the work of Willowell has been documented locally, nationally, and internationally in film, newspapers, and movies through the success of its programming that enables youth to connect with the environment, themselves, and each other, which I can give a huge testimonial for that because this is where Elena goes to school. Matt holds a BA, an MA, and an MSW from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. He lives in New Haven with his wife, Megan, and he has 3 adult children. Can I just say that Willowell has transformed our lives in so many ways to be raising such a happy, connected leader of a child, as you've all noticed with her being here a lot. I really have a lot to thank Matt for. So thank you so much for coming, Matt. And the floor is yours.
Morning. It's an honor to be here and share a little bit about the work that we're doing. And my hope is that this is interactive. So feel free to interrupt me if you have questions or anything I can do to sort of clarify my talk here. So as Elizabeth mentioned, for the last 23 years, we've been the Willowell Foundation, in partnership with the schools in the area, has been creating innovations in education and really creating opportunities for young people to have an authentic experience and to really own their education. I think the public schools are filled with so many wonderful, committed teachers. I think there's a lot that we can talk about that's great in the public schools. That being said, the reality of the design of public schools was created in the 1920s. And while we've seen amazing changes and transformations in our society, we're left with a model that's outdated. And we're seeing this sort of bear out in a variety of ways that are, I think, negative to young people. We're looking at sort of the rises of depression and anxiety, large numbers of kids just emotionally checking out. Not, you know, even those that are able to succeed in the system, they almost treat it like it's endurance sport. I need to kind of get through this so I can get on with the rest of my life. And there's a disconnect, I think, between what teachers are presenting and the experience that young people have of the world. And I just want to be very clear. I think teachers are doing amazing work. So I'm not saying that it's the fault of the teachers. I think it's really a lack of imagination in how it is that we approach education. And one of the things that's nice about being here today is I think of the Rotary, and I think of a sort of an entrepreneurial integrity that that you all bring to the community. And I like to think that that's what we're doing out at the Willowell Foundation. So I guess I'm just gonna give like a very quick sort of overview of that was sort of the broad philosophical, there we go, and just talking maybe a little bit nuts and bolts about the Willowell Foundation and some of the work that we've been engaged in the last 23 years. So our sort of flagship program is the Walden Project, and that was created in partnership with Virgins Union High School. So we're able to create an opportunity for young people that in many ways mirrors Thoreau's time out in the woods. He spent 2 years, 2 months and 2 days out at Walden Pond, and he sort of asked what we would say were 3 questions. What is my relationship with myself? What is my relationship with society? And what is my relationship with the natural world? And so we say that those are the core questions that frame our education. And when you're dealing with young people in late adolescence, the program serves students in grades 10 through 12. Those are the core questions that they're wrestling with. So we're bringing in immediacy to sort of the reality of where they are developmentally and trying to sort of merge it with our pedagogy. I think the piece that's really exciting about what we do is rather than meet in the 4 walls in a classroom, we have a 220-acre reserve out in Moncton, Vermont, and we are outside regardless of the weather. And I think that that's a really important challenge. I think that young people appreciate the challenge. You know, the jokes that are made, like everyone participates and everyone gets a trophy. You know, I think our concern for young people's self-esteem is important, but I think we rob them of the opportunities if we don't push them a little bit. We don't let them discover what it is that they're made of. And I think that Mother Nature really does push us. I mean, I think Vermont winter, I like what I do. I think I present interesting works of literature and ideas, but I think really the great teaching that happens is when young people are able to form a dynamic relationship with their environment. And that's what the Walden Project has done. And I think one of the things that's really neat about our work is that we are paired with the public schools. So this is open, to working class families. There are amazing programs out there like the Island School, the Mountain School. And, if you've got $40,000, you too can send your young person out and have this amazing experience. But I don't know, there's so many kids here who are deserving of that opportunity that maybe don't come from those means. So we're really proud of that partnership with the public schools, and the program's been really successful over the last 23 years, and not just because of what I'm doing. I think it's the amazing team at Willowell. We've really managed to attract a dynamic group of educators, artists, writers. Again, a critique of public schools, I would say, is that teachers are lovely people. I'm a proud employee of the public school system. My sister's a teacher, my brother-in-law is a teacher. So I love teachers, but we are a small subsect of the adults in the world. And as young people are thinking about who they are, who do they want to be, how do they want to engage in the world, you need to have a broader adult community to engage with. I think that's important because they're wrestling with, well, what kind of person do I want to be? So we very intentionally bring lots of community members into our dialogue and into our discourse. So the success of Walden's been great, and we decided that it shouldn't just be something for grades 10 through 12. We've had a vision from the very beginning of creating a pre-K through 12 opportunity that gives young people an opportunity to immerse themselves in the natural world. Thinking about what are the resources within our community, I think we're so blessed and lucky to live in Vermont. And I think there's so much that the landscape and the long tradition of stewardship and caretaking for this land in Vermont, what that can communicate to young people. So to that end, about 10, 11 years ago, we started a preschool program called the Wren's Nest Preschool. excuse me. And that's been another real successful run. It's 3 to 5 year olds. They rather than meeting in a building, they're outdoors in the woods. Their nap time is the cutest thing in the world. They have hammocks in the trees, and they're all sitting there in the dead of winter. You know, they're bundled up, and they're so cozy, and they're so happy. And you know, the rave reviews from parents is I mean, it's nap time might be the cutest thing in the world there, but I bet there's a lot that's really wonderful. And you know, one of the things that's great about childhood is that sense of wonder, that sense of awe, the sense of marveling, and we're alive. What does it all mean? And you know, it's the experience for the young people at Wren's Nest. It cultivates that sense, and that's a really special thing. So fast forward to a few years ago, pandemic hits. A number of parents reached out to us and said, you know, great work that you all are doing with the little people, great work that you're doing with the high school folks, but what about the people in the middle? We've got a pandemic going on. People are feeling really disconnected. You all meet outside. Can we design something that's a response to the existential crisis that we're facing? So we picked up that gauntlet, and we launched a program called the New Roots program, which Elena is like one of the proud I feel like she's an incredible leader in the program. And the response originally was, okay, here's the pandemic. We've got some resources, and young people are in crisis. They need connection. They need some really vibrant opportunities. So we sort of like, it was one of those building the plane while you're flying, throwing on duct tape and baling twine, like let's create a program. Let's see what happens. And happily, and I think this oftentimes is the case. I think when you take sort of an interesting leap forward, the right people oftentimes come on board. We started the program having recruited some great staff that we worked with through our summer camps, and we projected, okay, we're going to do this. I think we're looking at a $50,000 loss, but we're a nonprofit, and our bottom line is hoping to strengthen the community. And if what we're doing is relevant, the right supports will come in. And you know, sure enough, we had amazing supports from the local community. From we received some big grants from the state. We got a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, and that sort of allowed us to operate the program with breaking even, which, you know, for a nonprofit, that's all right. That was good enough. We were happy to pay our staff, but more importantly, we're happy to create important connections and opportunities for young people when those weren't readily available at that time. So as we were doing it, it was clear that what we were doing wasn't just great during the pandemic, and a number of families said, you know, hey, we'd like to see this evolve, and we'd like to see this continue. And so the New Roots program is essentially now sort of splintered into 3 directions. We've created an after-school program for young people in Addison County. We've created a middle school program called Pond Brook, and we've kind of continued New Roots. So New Roots goes for kids roughly 7 to 14. The Pond Brook is for like 13 to 15-year-olds, and then now Walden Project sort of carries them forward from there. So we are in a position now where we're offering opportunities for young people to have an immersive experiential education in the outdoors from, you know, pre-K through 12. And it's really sort of amazing to see the results, you know, over this time period, because of the Walden Project's been going for 23 years. You know, now we've got adults and we've got data, and we can, you know, actually make some translations from where students were when they were in adolescence, you know, to where they are at present. And, you know, the data really supports that what we're doing is powerful work. And I think particularly in the areas of environment, a lot of writers and a lot of them folks go on to education. So it's really cool. This year we have the first daughter of one of the original Walden students. So I'm feeling old, but in a good way, So that's sort of broadly speaking, the sort of educational framework that we've got going on. And then the other piece on top of that, we host artist residencies. We've got a partnership with the Newburger Museum down in New York. So we're regularly bringing artists to the community. This last spring, we hosted Nicolas de Jesus, who is from Guerrero, Mexico. He's an artist in the Aztec tradition, and he spent 2 weeks up in Moncton and interacted with the students. in the New Roots program and the Walden Project, also Virgins High School, the Red Cedar School, and Mount Abe. So, we've got a very particular relationship with Addison Northwest Supervisory Union, but we're also looking to kind of create the connections, throughout the community. And at present, New Roots and Pond Brook, they are running independent of the public schools, but we are working with educators to try to embed that into the public schools, to create as an inclusive an opportunity, as possible for young people. So in 1,000 words or less, that's sort of the work that we're up to. And like I said, I would like this to hopefully be interactive and informative. So I'm really happy to answer any questions you might have. Yeah. Yeah.
Meet the standards of, say, I think of like homeschooling and public schooling as far as reading, math, and
Yeah, so yes, we are. I think with Pond Brook and New Roots, not that I think there are a lot of the standards that we are meeting because it exists outside of the public school system at present. We haven't necessarily checked all the boxes to do that. The Walden Project, though, a student graduates from the Walden Project, they graduate with a degree, from Virgins Union High School. And, they are able to sort of translate that experience into, entering the workforce or going on to college. A higher percentage of students from the Walden Project go on to post-secondary education than those in the mainstream. And we've got a really good success record. There are a number of colleges, particularly those with strong programs in writing and environmental studies, actually actively seek out Walden students. We had a stretch of 10 years where a Walden Project student received the President's Scholarship at College of the Atlantic, which was over $100,000 over 4 years. So I think, at first people were like, well, sounds like a bunch of hoods in the woods. I don't know, a little weird hippie stuff. But, we can actually point to real examples and real data that says this is making a difference in kids' lives. So that's exciting. Yeah.
So I have 100 questions, but can you give an example of how a student would be taught, let's say in the Walden Project? I'm particularly interested in whether your students get experience in the sciences and trades.
Great question. So generally speaking, our primary classroom is a fire circle in a cedar grove. And we try to be as interdisciplinary as possible. So we're not like, now we are doing English, now we are doing social studies, now we are doing science. We tend to have it be a much more, because again, business people, you sort of know, like if you're dealing with like issues around permitting, you're looking at government, you're looking at sort of wastewater and what happens there. You're looking at the sort of, how does this impact the larger community? So, as adults, we don't say, I am using my lens of chemistry, now I'm using my lens of math. We solve problems by drawing on all of the disciplines. So we try to be as interdisciplinary as possible. That being said, I think with the sciences, what we do can really sing out in the woods. So, for example, you're studying the wetlands. One student who was at the end of the last year was talking about, like, we would learn about plants and wetlands, but we learned about it under fluorescent lights, in a linoleum floor. For us, it's like, okay, let's go into the wetlands. Let's look at the plant communities there. Let's look at the animal communities that are there. Let's go tracking. Sue Morse, who I don't know if you know, I think she's one of the great human beings in the state of Vermont. She's runs the Keeping Track program out in Jericho. But we'll bring her along and she'll spend, we'll spend, days in the woods tracking with her. And I'm a big nerd. I've spent a lot of time in classrooms, and I tell you what, walking around in the woods with Sue Morse is a far better education than any biology class I've ever taken. So again, it's this idea, it's science isn't an abstraction. It's like, let's really see, why are these plants here? Why are these animals here? What happens if we plant this or do this? So the students, another piece of it is we're trying to, that great New England tradition of self-reliance, how can you be a self-reliant person? The students grow food for their lunches. So, it's kind of fun when we get off, the bus drops them off in the morning. We have a sweet, like 1 acre garden. We're like, well, what do we want to eat? Okay, go grab some kale. Right now we've got some raspberries that are, just wonderful. So like, I think our school lunch program is, fantastic. When we're lucky and we have hunters in the program, This one student, I made a deal with him. He could come into school 15-20 minutes late if he shared some of what he got for the hunt. And he was a crack shot, and we would eat duck over the fire with wild apples and maple syrup. I mean, I don't think there was a better school lunch program in America on those days. So that was particularly awesome. So we're able to integrate a lot of what we do. The other piece of it is that all of Thoreau, we say we're educating deliberately. Like half of the curriculum really focused on writing, environmental studies, the social sciences, and the arts, but we also give latitude for students to sort of follow their own interests and to follow their own passions. So we had one student who was interested in Native American culture, and he decided that he wanted to build a dugout canoe old school style. So he did a bunch of research on the subject. He felled a tree by hand. He burnt out the log, old school style. He figured out a way to take it down into the local watershed. And then he paddled his homemade canoe for 2 weeks, and he took pictures and wrote about it and documented it. So, for him, his education felt like an adventure. Was he meeting standards? Yeah, we could point to all kinds of things that he learned about trees, sort of about the technical, how do you build a canoe? Like, how do you sort of safely navigate the waterways? But for him, it wasn't like, okay, I'm checking these boxes so that I do it. It was him following his own curiosity, following his own passion. And again, I think that there's so much that's good in the public schools, but I think one of the challenges is that we want to make sure that students have certain experiences and certain understandings. But I would say the question is, how can we do it in a way where they're not feeling like it's death by boredom, and it doesn't feel like, okay, I learned that and now I can go on to my life. John Dewey, who's a philosophical sort of guru of ours, and sort of from Vermont, and the father of progressive education, said that education is not preparation for life, education is life. And so that's a dictum that really drives a lot of what we do. Yeah, Jude.
When my grandson was in elementary school over in Cali, there was a program called Earthwalk.
Yeah.
And which I'd never heard of before. And so he was able, the school system allowed him to spend 1 day a week there. So every Friday, he didn't go to school, he went there.
Yeah.
And now he's 21 and he just finished building his own cabin and bought 9 acres of land, and he built a 2-story garage, and he has more equipment in the trunk of his car than I can imagine. And I kept thinking, while he started this Earthwalk, I thought, is he missing out on stuff, that other kids are doing on Fridays in the school system? But it's really made a huge difference. And my son just started teaching over in Plainfield, and he's working with a special program for kids who really don't fit into the school system that well, but they spend every afternoon outside. And he did too. In the winter, when we had blizzards and everything, they're still outside. Didn't seem to be a big problem. So I totally agree with you that experience gives them actually courage too.
Yeah, and
stuff.
Yeah, and the data bears it out. It's not just, oh, I think this might. There's scholarly studies, all over the place that are saying, reduction in anxiety, the reductions in depression, the increase in self-esteem. The other piece too, when you think about young people, they're in a period of dynamic growth physically, and yet we ask them to sit still in rows, for an hour and 15 minutes, and God forbid someone should just kind of get up and shift. People are like, nope, you need to sit right back down. It's I know I can't. I know the few adults who can sit still for that long, and yet we ask students to do that in a time where they're trying to develop a healthy relationship with their bodies. I also just I just want to point out how tough the kids are. Elena, it'll be 35 degrees out and she's wearing shorts. She's so much tougher than I am. And so I really do think that, that there's a way that we're able to integrate like mind and body in this approach to education. And Earthwalk's a great program. I think, I totally believe in Willowell's approach, but there are a lot of really special programs, throughout the state. Vermont is a leader in what's called place-based education. And and it makes sense because I think, our landscape is an amazing resource. And, I think the national standards of what kids should learn, I think that's all fine. But I think that there's something really special about the state of Vermont and the culture and that sense of community. And I think, that relationship with the landscape, I think that that's one of the most important dimensions, that we can bring to young people. They do. The Walden Project students do. They take tests in that they're, well over half of them go on to post-secondary education, so they've got to take SATs and things like that. I would say the strength of the program is definitely in the writing and the humanities, so they do incredibly well. The relationship with Virginia's high school, students will take a math class in the building for the first semester, one class, and then the rest of the time is out in the woods. So there are ways you can integrate math, but math, there's, I think, a very specific scope and sequence that has to be approached. So the others, you can work them in and be creative, but I think math is linear by nature. And so that's one of those where we're not trying to do everything, so yeah. So the curriculum, though, primarily we do assessment based on portfolios. So within the structure of Walden, it's not, okay, we discussed this in environmental studies, or we discussed this in psychology class, and you're going to be tested tomorrow on points 1 through 7. It's more portfolio based. So we ask them to document their learning. So it's not that they can't do anything, but we're asking them to create a meaningful relationship, with their learning. And there are a variety of ways to do that. And again, I think it feels a little more authentic for the students to be able to write and reflect in ways that aligns with their hopes, dreams, and aspirations. I had one student who we have a requirement that they do research. And this one student was like, I don't want to write a full-on research paper. Can I build like an old school oven? So said, okay, sure. And so he spent, I want to say 100+ hours researching, hauling stones, figuring out how to make the clay. And, he did this incredible research. He built this beautiful pizza oven, which lasted for like 11 or 12 years. Probably thousands of pizzas were made out of it. And I remember at the final, we do portfolio presentations, and he felt really sort of smug about himself. He's like, I got out of doing a research paper, and, we're eating pizza, and like, yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. So, I think the skills that we want to ask the students to cultivate, I think there are a lot of creative ways that we can approach it. It doesn't have to be, the model that is the dominant one in the public schools.
I'm intrigued because my daughter, she's a new science high school teacher down in Arkansas at an alternative high school. She's had the police come in and take kids away. Like, it's a real, kids are in this school because they are, for whatever reason, their traditional education has been disrupted. And so I'm always trying to come up with ideas, the mom thing, like, oh, did you try this? Did you try that? And then I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, Arkansas is a bit different than Vermont as far as her environment and being able to just go outside. But like, even just hearing you say portfolio learning, like, I'm going to take some of what you're saying and throw it at her as ideas to help these kids. Because there's only 60 kids in the school, but everyone is on an individual plan, to meet the needs to graduate.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, maybe the traditional role just needs to go out the window, and you have to approach it in a different way.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why the system is the way it is. And again, I don't think it's all bad. And I think there are a lot of really amazing people there, trying their hardest to make it work. I think, that tension between, you want to make sure everyone gets what they need. And so that's sort of like a systems model, but like the reality developmentally for a student as an individual, if they're going to own the experience, they don't want to have their education feel like I've and particularly thinking of the contrary nature of adolescence, they're not like, oh, I want to do this because I can fit into the system. They want to feel like that they can own it in an authentic way. So I think there's a healthy dialectic tension between, sort of the systemic expectations and the individual needs. And I think if you can sort of work that tension creatively, you can find ways for students, to own their experience and not feel alienated, from the system, because there's a lot that the system, brings to the table that is beneficial. Yeah. Sally.
So I'm a physician, traditional learner. Marty is as well. I'm thinking about the different styles of education, like somebody who can only play an instrument with the music, and somebody who does improv on their instrument. It's kind of like some of us need or respond better to the more structured, follow the book. This, we're gonna do this, this, and this. And others, possibly like your students, work better with a more independent, self-directed kind of education. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
I learned when one of my sons was born. My husband is sorry, gross generalizations, okay? My husband's left-handed, and he grew up being called a slow learner, but he had dyslexia, or whatever dyslexia is.
Mhm.
I have a son that's just like that. I have another son who's just like me. If you took the four of us and you gave us the option of sitting down and getting this done, or going out in the woods, two of us would go in the woods and two of us wouldn't. Well, maybe my other son probably would, but he plays bagpipes, so we can't count him.
Oh, I like him.
But so it strikes me that, and I think you're saying this, that having the option of different kinds of education for different students or different children is probably the ultimate solution.
Yeah. I agree. One of the things that, just to build on what you're saying, though, I think that one of the things that makes the Walden Project special, and I would say, New Roots as well, is that it is a heterogeneous mix of students. I understand why people, well, let's take the kids who are having trouble and let's isolate them and let's give them something different. But I think everyone needs a menu of choices. So, back in the Walden origin story was kind of funny. I had been teaching English, drama, and psychology in the high school. So I was just a mainstream, I was a mainstream teacher. And I had a student who was 21 years old and he died of a heart attack. And I remember him, I had him from 7th grade through 12th grade, because Virginia is relatively small. So you develop these relationships with kids. And I remember him saying, we need more options. We need more options in the school. And I was really devastated by his death, because we were close, and a 21-year-old, he was a state champion in wrestling. This was like such an unlikely candidate that you would expect something like this would happen. So I went into the then principal's office, and I kind of had the seed of the Walden Project idea. And I said, well, what about something more? And the principal said, all right, I got 2 kids who are big pains in the keister. We're spending over $100,000 on out-of-district placement services. If you're willing to take those 2 kids on, we'll let you try your crazy idea. And then, bless you. And then what happened, because I was sort of a known quantity in the school, was able to kind of attract a diverse group of students. And I think that diversity is important. So, like, I would say, making a generalization, but not entirely incorrect, I would say a third of our kids are on the edge of dropping out. They are sucking wind. The system is not serving them. A third they're going through the motions. They're doing okay. They're getting like B's and C's, but they're not necessarily feeling connected. And then a third of the kids would be in the gifted and talented, and they're just bored. They want to do more than just, here's the standard, let me meet it. Like, give me some room to do things. So we've been very intentional about having a heterogeneous mix of students. We want the Walden community to be a microcosm of the larger community. So, going back to your point, I think it's like having lots of options, because we all, not every kid who graduates from high school wants to go in the same direction. So we need to be able to individualize what we do so that the education aligns with their personal dreams and aspiration. And I think there are great programs in the building there, you know, and I think one of the things I think that the pandemic has taught us is that there are lots of ways to approach education. So I'm not sitting here saying, I have found the solution and, you know, you must support this and this is the answer. I'm presenting this as this is one option in a very, very complicated problem. And, you know, you think of the tens of millions of kids that are in the school system. It's not about one solution. It's about coming up with something that's responsive and embedded in the community. You know, that's what I love about what I do. I feel like it is very much something that's, you know, out of New England. You know, like I think that like our approach is a very New Englandish approach, and you know what they do in Arkansas, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I don't know enough about the Arkansas culture to say like, well, this is how you can meaningfully engage the community. But I think I think we lose opportunities if we tell young people that the only way that they can engage their learning is with teachers. I think we need to open it up. I think, you know, having doctors, having tradesmen, having artists, having, you know, whoever in the community is willing to come in and have an honest conversation with the kids. I think it's great. Like we intentionally don't shy away from controversy, meaning, we'll have like the most liberal person you can imagine coming out and talking. We'll have the most conservative person that you can imagine talking. We'll have the priest, we'll have the preacher, we'll have the rabbi. It sounds like the beginning of a joke, but we'll invite all these people into the community, you know, to engage with the students, because that's important. That's how you develop a full sense of the community. You know, it's I came across it's a tangent, but I think it's a useful one. There are 10 million less children in poverty than they were in 1997 in America. This came about, you know, Clinton had sort of sided with the Republicans saying, you know what, there's this culture of single mothers who are beholden to the welfare state, and we need to get these people into the workforce. And this was like sort of more of a conservative approach. And Clinton said, yes, we need to do that. And then the liberal side was saying, well, you know what, if we're going to do that, we need to increase childcare. We need to create earned, you know, income credit and things like that. And so it was the intersection of both approaches. It wasn't that the Republicans were right and the Democrats were wrong, or the Democrats were right and the Republicans were wrong. It was the ability for people to come together and say, here's a problem. How do we, in a real way, tackle this problem? And so what we're doing out in the woods, I hope, is that we're saying, there are diverse perspectives and we may disagree, but that doesn't mean that your perspective's invalid or mine's invalid. And maybe the tension of that disagreement, it's out of that we can come up with a real solution. Yeah.
If you were, so you said that the school system is kind of traditional, out of date a bit, but you said it in a positive way. And if you were on a committee to actually reconstruct, would you somehow blend the both? Would you blend the traditional school with your approach, or are they too diverse that they really can't be blended?
I think they can. I think they can. I definitely think that. I think we represent a sort of really strong experiential model. But you know, like you were saying, I mean, I think, you know, and with like the math instruction, I mean, I think there's a lot of great stuff that happens in the classroom. I think I've seen students go through it. You know, I have 3 kids, you know, 2 of them were non-traditional in their approach to learning. 1 was traditional. I think they're all successful adults. I think the most important thing is integrating student voice and student ownership in education. And so not just saying there's one pathway. And I think from a legislative point of view, Vermont's ahead of the curve. I think we're a little slow to enact it, but we've got legislation about multiple pathways, you know, to graduation. So I think there's a lot that's going right in the Vermont schools, and I do see us heading in that direction. Yeah, Leslie and then Martin.
I think to go along with what you just said, and also you, Sally, that, you know, I think some students maybe think they learn better in a more linear fashion, but maybe that's because they haven't been challenged or provided those opportunities to do something different. It was probably about 30 years ago that the Randolph school system enacted their senior project. So students had to do exactly what you're describing with a portfolio kind of a thing, and had a community team, and had to research. And I remember, because I was working there, that there were students who said they were going to the school board, they were going to sue the school board to make this not happen. They were terrified because for the first time in their lives, they were actually going to be directing their learning, and they were scared to death. And I had the privilege of being there when these students presented their senior projects. I still get goosebumps all these years later because one young man took a motorcycle that had been burned, completely refurbished it, brought it in, had it in the classroom, showed, discussed everything. Then he took it out in the parking lot and rode it around to prove that it worked. And a young girl who was absolutely terrified came out of her presentation, could almost cry, and she said, I am so proud of myself. I did such a good job. And I thought, oh my God, I hardly ever hear that. And it was self-directed. So it was kind of, these students had always done things in a very linear way, and they were terrified. And then afterwards, they were so incredibly proud. So we need more of that.
Right, it's authentic, right? Because it's like, I'm not doing this because I got to pass this test. I'm doing this because I'm curious, and I'm going to talk to you about my process as a learner. I mean, I think the questions around education, they're complicated, and yet we reduce it to multiple choice tests or whatever. Yeah.
Actually, we have both of those. We have both of those here. We have 8th grade challenge. Every 8th grade student has to do a project, and some great projects. We also have a senior project that every senior year student has to do to graduate. So, you know, and it happened back in the 1980s. That was going on.
And by the way, that program doesn't always work. There are any number of students who blow it off because they don't really want to do it.
No program always works.
No.
I'm sensing I'm coming to the end of the time, but
One
Martin,
more
did you have one more question? Yeah.
I thought about this a lot. I've always felt that what you really want to do with an education, however you do it, is you want to come out of this, not what did I learn, facts, but how do I think? How do I approach situations going forward in life? And it seems to me you can do that in a conventional classroom, although there are some challenges, especially if you unfortunately have teachers that are not sort of inspired, if you like.
Yeah.
But what could be more characteristic of that than this fellow who built the canoe?
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to skin the cat, and it seems to me you've got to.
Yeah. Well, thanks. It was a real pleasure coming here this morning. So thanks for your kind attention. Thank you. Okay. All righty.
And in thanks for your coming and speaking to us, we give a donation to the mentoring program at Wilson Central School.
Awesome. Wonderful.
So thank you so
Okay.
much. for
All right.
coming out.
Well, thank
And
you.
one last thing, pick one of these and read the last 3 numbers.
All right. Oh, 888. All right. You're the big winner.
All right, then, thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for coming here this morning. Elizabeth and Alana had to leave early.
Yeah.
Apparently they didn't get a pass.
Yeah. Yeah. They're going to do detention if they don't show up in time.
From what you said about Elena, she's probably the one saying, come on, we have to get going.
Yeah.
In shorts, she's barefoot.
I know. She really is
I
like
know.
so much tougher than me. It's funny. All right. Thank you. Good.
Okay, now Sergeant at Arms.
Right, sorry I was late. I got off at 7 o'clock committee meeting. It's my last 3 months on the board of the medical